Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf Podcast, which is available on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes. Also available as a video podcast on YouTube /RevelatorAlf. So, RevelatorAlf. Today I'm talking about Harley Davidson motorcycles and the changing demographics of ownership, and also what the future holds for the company. There have always been lots of myths and lifestyle associations with the Harley Davidson brand. We know it started in the early 1900s, 1903, where their first motorcycle was made available. The whole history surrounding the brand, the big American brand, is quite well known. You know, the Harleys and the Davidsons, came together, in the little shed, the little workshop. They started making the motorcycles. And then, their early days, they were, in competition with a lot of other manufacturers as well. They sort of came out of this bicycle era, of motorized bicycle era, I would say, challenging with Indian and the likes on the flat track days, on the dirt track days. And they came out, and then, whilst others faded away, Harley managed to continue with not only their branding, but also with their motorcycles and the evolution of the motorcycles. But it wasn't really until the Second World War when they started to produce purpose-built motorcycles that can be pretty much ridden anywhere, that they started to really build upon this brand. And that's where also prior to that you had lots of groups of people who actually get in motorcycles but actually deal in second-hand parts, but also adapting bikes, stripping them down, making them into bobbers, making them into flat trackers. And that in itself evolved into another side of Harley, separate from Harley Davidson, but it was something that fueled the company. They were able to say, okay, we've got another dimension here of kids, let's say, they're taking our bikes, and there's a whole nother market to be exploited. So that's why Harley Davidson really started coming out with the branding, the clothing line, all that kind of stuff, but also about parts, making extra parts, extra customized parts or custom parts for Harley Davidson, so you could change it up a little bit. So I suppose from a very early point, the company were set out to make a base model. They could make a base model, and they knew that the customers thereafter would take that base model and they would make it their own. And they formed a whole ethos around that, if you like. Don't worry about the bike, don't worry about the evolution of the bike, don't worry about technology and whether it can keep up with the Joneses, the Japanese, the British, whatever. The idea is that we produce a bike, and our customers are going to love it, but they're also going to want to make it their own, and we're going to help them with that in supplying parts, but also we're going to help evolve this whole lifestyle, this whole community. And this is what it was, a community that not only stretched to the other side of town, but also stretched across county lines, state lines, and indeed across the country, in the United States I'm talking about, but actually ultimately across the world. And that's what we're talking about here. That's where it started. But somewhere along the line, somewhere along this journey of this pathway, Harley Davidson, they lost their way, and they haven't really recovered from it in many ways. They've also failed to keep up with the competition and also be stubborn in how loyal they are to their original identity, that VTwin identity. Whilst on one hand it has kept the true believers happy, they've also started to realize actually we're behind the curve here, so we need to step up our game. And in so doing, they're starting to alienate that hardcore customer base, the ones that helped the company evolve over the many years. And now with this More Roads program, More Roads to Harley's program, which they're trying to bring in new customers, basically. They acknowledge that actually their older customers are not buying Harley Davidsons, because guess what? They're overpriced, they're really expensive for the technology that you're getting. So people aren't buying Harley Davidsons, let's say certainly the old guard. The new guard, the new kids coming through, well, they're not really buying Harley Davidson in great numbers. So then the company is saying, okay, we need to expand all over the world and we need to try different types of motorcycles. They've done it with the street, which hasn't been a great success. They're doing it with foreign markets. They're moving into China initially and then possibly into India, with the low CC bikes. But they've done this before. They've teamed up with Italian manufacturers in the past as well. So this is nothing new in terms of that and producing low CC bikes. But they're not producing it for the heartlands, for the American heartlands. Everybody always thinks that America is the number one market for Harley Davidsons, and it is, but it's a rapidly reducing market as other manufacturers start to take hold. Other American manufacturers are getting a bigger foothold, notably Indian, but VTwin were doing it before, that they were starting to gain market share before Polaris, the parent company, decided to cut VTwin and invest all their time in Indian. Indian, for many people, are producing a far superior bike that is actually comparable to the style, to the ethics, to the looks of Harley Davidson. Harley have always produced a brand, you could say. They've sold T-shirts, they've sold jackets, they've sold stickers, the whole hog thing, the Harley Owners Group. It's more than a motorcycle with Harley Davidson. It's more than just getting on two wheels and riding. Throughout the history of the company, they've sold this idea to many of these people that it's more than the bike, the technology, the nuts and bolts. It's about the experience, the riding experience, the freedom. But freedom means so many things to different people. It means different things to different people. There isn't one thing that you could say about Harley Davidson and say, yes, it is about this, it's about this bike, it's about the open road, whatever, because it's changed. The demographics have changed. The Harley Davidson have had to change. Their own backyard is changing. So there are lots of myths about Harley Davidson as they started, as they grew. Even hardcore fans of Harley Davidson sometimes get very mistaken by what Harley is. They would say, "Oh, Harley Davidson hasn't got any off-road pedigree. They don't make off-road bikes." Actually, they kind of started in off-road world. Because they got this new Pan America coming out and they say, "Oh, that's never going to work. That's never going to work." Well, actually, a lot of their heritage has come from off-road riding worlds. In fact, they made off-road riding bikes in the 70s when they teamed up with the AMF years, and they teamed up with Italian manufacturers as well, for low CC bikes. But even before then, they made that. They've also had big departures in their past from their traditional cruiser bikes. They have made different types of bikes. One of my favourite bikes of all time is the Cafe Racer, the XLCR, which is based off the Sportster frame. The Sportster is the sportier type of bike. They've evolved their engines. Yes, it's still the variation of the same thing, the VTwin, but they have evolved those bikes and those engines. They started to make lots of different variations on model types. And for many people, that's just got too confusing. But it's almost too much of the same thing. They needed to have another type of bike. another type of adventure, another type of pathway. Now that they've tried to start that journey, they've come under severe criticism. They've got this Pan America coming out. They'll have the Street Fighter coming out. They have that low custom come out with the new Type N engine, this liquid cooled engine. They've gone with the street bike that hasn't been a success. But now, obviously, they're launching right now the Livewire. But the Livewire comes in at $30,000, pounds, British pounds as well. Not many people are going to be buying that bike, for that money. Definitely no working man is going to do that, or working woman is going to buy that for a bike that only you'll be lucky to get 100 miles out of. Yeah, if you're a city slicker, maybe, and you work on the stock market and you want some cool bike, that's got the Harley logo and everything, yeah, you might go for that. But how many people are really going to buy that bike and use it to its full potential? Which actually, its potential isn't that great, because competitors, electric motorcycle competitors, are so far in advance of what they're producing, and also they're at a fraction of the cost. I've always said about electric motorcycles that it's an evolving time. It's almost like when the first mobile phone came out, or the first phone came out, computers. The technology is moving so quickly. No sooner have you bought something, it's almost going to be out of date. And that's what's happening in electric motorcycle racing world. That, if you look at the electric bikes on the TT, they started out and they could do a lap barely. It was taking a long time for them to do a lap. Now they're breaking records left, right, and centre. This is where we're at the Livewire. Will they sell many motorcycles? Maybe not, but they'll probably use that technology to actually look at different pathways for the future. They've got these kind of scooters, these electric bicycles coming out, but again, they're so behind other competitors in this field. And then are they going to put a Harley price tag on it? That's going to, people are too savvy now. The younger kids coming, and I say kids, the younger generation, the next generation coming through, they're too savvy. They're too savvy for this. They're too clued up to say, well, actually, I can buy a product here, or I can buy another product here that's better and it's cheaper. But okay, so what? It hasn't got a Harley logo on it. People don't really care about that. The thing is, if you buy a Harley Davidson, or if you're thinking about Harley Davidson, there is an experience with it. No doubt. There is a riding experience, no doubt. And if you like that riding experience, this is the key thing, because many people get on it and they won't enjoy the riding experience. But if you like the riding experience, the chances are you'll love it. And the chances are you'll love that VTwin feeling. However, if you start to deviate from that VTwin feeling, that feeling of, do you know what, I'm not quite sure if this bike is going to last the journey. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be comfortable all the way around. I'm not quite, if you start moving away from that bare bones, seat your pants kind of riding to something that is too Germanic, too Japanese, too what's the word I'm looking for? It's too reliable. It's too safe in terms of mechanically safe. Then no doubt you are going to lose something about it. It's just, I kind of compare it to, when lots of places around the world banned smoking in bars and restaurants, which I kind of agree with. I don't, get me wrong. I'm not saying that smoking is good for you or anything like that. But at the same time, for me, and I quit actually around about the same time when they sort of banned smoking here in the UK. And I was living in the States at the time, in California, and they banned it there over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever it was. And I was living there at the time, and I thought, crikey, this is naff. You can't even smoke in a bar. See, everybody was stood outside, and same thing happened here. And I thought, what, it's time to quit. But when I did, it kind of, going into bars thereafter and restaurants didn't really appeal to me anymore. It was just an odd sensation. And still to this day, although I don't particularly care for smoking, or I'd never go back to smoking myself, there is something about, you go into a bar and all you can smell is stale yeast and body odor, as opposed to at least smoking masked the whatever was there. And I can't have that same relationship with Harley Davidson, with, or not even just Harley Davidson, but with older bikes. Yes, they're not necessarily eco-friendly. Yes, they're not necessarily the most technologically advanced bike out there, but there is something special about it. There is something bare bones about it, and there's something that it almost puts two fingers up to modern life, or the future of modernity, and they're just saying, no, we're still holding strong to our values. And for that, I think I like it. For that, I think I like the older bikes, the older technology. I don't necessarily want something all done for me. I don't necessarily want all the latest gizmos on a bike, all the traction control, anti-wheelie control, or whatever you've got in it. It's just got too far. I've repeatedly gone into dealerships in the past and said, look, you've just got too much stuff on it. And their argument said, well, our customers want all this. I said, yeah, the customers want all it because it's new tech, but chances are they're never going to need it. And whatever happened to just riding your bike properly? There is some technology on bikes that absolutely I think is fantastic. ABS I think is fantastic, but it's never going to be the one thing that's going to completely save your life. You still got to ride the bike. So I think on one hand, Harley Davidson have been very slow. In fact, not even slow. They just haven't kept up with other manufacturers as they've evolved. But at the same time, they've been true to their sounds. They've been true to what they've wanted to do. But they've also acknowledged that within that time frame, within that ethos, they've had to evolve. There's no doubt, because it's a global game now. You can't rely on the American market. You can't rely on a British, European market. In fact, whilst you may enjoy Harley Davidson as a brand, let's say, or even as a motorcycle, there are different riding conditions, different roads, different things to consider, different legislation to consider as well. Let's just take fuel, for example. In the United States, they offer different grades, lower octane fuel ratings than we do here in Europe. Also, they've had methanol-based fuel for a while. It's starting to come out here in Europe for a while. Different parts of the world have different fuel. The bikes are slightly different. They're tuned slightly different, may have different valves. Whatever. The timing might be different to compensate for that fuel. So Harley as a brand, they have to make bikes according to the market, but they're also looking at bikes that potentially will fit better in the market. I always thought that the street bike, for example, those street bikes are better for the European market than they are for the United States market. But, they haven't really kind of taken off, have they? The Sportster, love the Sportster. But I think that Sportster bike, in many ways, because it's old technology and it is going to fail with this keeping up with the emissions regulations of Europe, but also the United States around the world, it's primed to get a new engine in there. It doesn't have, it's not that same engine. Maybe this new engine they're putting in the Street Fighter, in the Pan American, maybe that is the new Sportster engine. They can continue the line, but it doesn't even have to be called the Sportster. It can be called something, but it's something that's lightweight, small, agile, lightweight, good power to weight ratio, and something that it's going to be small, compact, that will appeal to lots of different people. There are so many ways in which Harley Davidson can improve without betraying their roots, and I've kind of talked about this before. But there's also many ways in which they can evolve, and they will evolve. They have to evolve. There's no argument about this. The old guard of who used to buy motorcycles has changed. I'll be on this earth for a few more years, so will you. But what happens after that? From a business point of view, from a company's point of view, whether you care for the company or not is kind of irrelevant. But you have to acknowledge that a company has to think about the future and has to think about where where the technology is going, where trends are going, where fashion is going, and who is likely to buy their motorcycles in the future. However, they have one big issue. The one big issue with Harley Davidson in comparison to competitors is their pricing. Now, their pricing is comparable to other high-end motorcycles, no doubt. You buy a BMW, a Ducati, a Kawasaki, you are looking at mid-15,000s up to 20,000 and beyond. But the technology on those bikes is so much more advanced than the technology on Harley Davidsons. They are different types of bikes, no doubt, so they're hard to compare. But in terms of technology, they are streets ahead. So Harley can introduce this kind of technology, but just they've been very slow. Only this year, for the 2020 models on the Tourer range, they've started to introduce this RDRS, this rider defense, reflex rider defense rider system, or whatever it's called. You can check this out for yourself. But essentially it makes up of traction control, ABS, enhanced ABS, cornering ABS, all this kind of stuff, tire pressure monitoring system. It's got a hill hold launch system on it. Well, this is all pretty standard stuff, for a lot of other bikes out there, a lot of other modern bikes out there, especially when it comes to traction control, core and IBS, managing the amount of power to the rear tire, under braking, all that kind of stuff. So this is all sort of standard stuff, but now this is only an option for the tourists. And say, well, actually, why not make this an option for other bikes? And in fact, why is it even an option? Why don't you make this standard? This technology should be standard. So maybe Harley Davidson are looking at their old client base and saying, well, if we introduce all this stuff, maybe we really are going to alienate people. Well, guess what? You already have. You already have alienated people with your prices, with the way you've gone. You've people are a bit fed up in many quarters, not all quarters, of course, but many quarters. People are fed up with saying, well, all the Harley branding and the Harley motorcycles and overpricing here and all that kind of stuff. What they want is a substance, what they want with the bike. Let's not forget, you're a motorcycle manufacturer. You need to produce motorcycles. The motorcycles that people want to buy. Not the one that I love, not the one that my neighbour loves, but that lots of people will like. So that's it. You need to produce that. Now, I've always said I've never been the greatest fan of Harley Davidson motorcycles per se. There've always been individual bikes, so I thought, yeah, like that, like the aesthetics of that, like the way it sounds, it looks, all that kind of stuff. I like the proportions, I do a bit of background reading and I think, okay, yeah, rake and trail on that looks good. Maybe go and test ride one. Ooh, like that. That's a good bike. That handles well. It surprises you. It surprises you. It was only until a friend of mine, I've said this story before, I've told this story before, I was looking at potentially different Harley brands. I hadn't realised that, and Indian as well, I must say, I hadn't realised that the Softail was on a new chassis until a friend of mine told me about it. And he said, if you're going to buy a Harley, go and try the new chassis first. He said, also have a look at the Sport Glide. So I went into the Harley dealership and I was like, yeah, I'm not really sure what I want. I was still in the big adventure bike mode. And I was still had another year before I had to make a choice whether I wanted to carry on with adventure bikes or do a Harley type bike or another type of bike, whatever it was. So I was shopping around. As soon as I sat on the Sport Glide, as soon as I took it out for a ride, I knew that bike was for me. I test rode other Softails, and you can look at the videos for that on the YouTube channel. But essentially, it was that bike. And this is what I say to people. If you're ever in doubt about any kind of bike, and it doesn't matter if it's a Harley, an Indian, a BMW, or whatever, you've got to test ride it first of all. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says about your bike, because it's your bike. It doesn't matter what modifications you do, if anybody else approves. Who cares what anybody else thinks? It's your bike. You decide whether it's right for you. But I always say, pick a bike that fits you and where you're riding and what you want out of it. So as soon as I rode that bike, I didn't go in to Harley dealership thinking, I'm definitely going to buy a Harley, come what may, I don't care, I'm buying a Harley. What I went in there is with an open mind. And as soon as I rode it, I had to stop myself from putting pen to paper straight away. I knew that I had to hold my feelings back, and I knew that I wanted to try the bikes. And I did. I tried other bikes, I tried other manufacturers as well. And again, I did my due diligence, but I still came back to the notion that actually this bike is what I'm looking for right now. And it hasn't proven me wrong. But this was less about the Harley myth, the Harley legacy, the Harley heritage, or history, I should say. You know, I knew all about that. You know, I'd written articles about it. I'd heard about it. I've spoken to lots of people. I know lots of people who have got Harleys. It wasn't about that. This was about purely the riding experience. And for me, that's what it's always been about. It's been about the riding experience, whether it rides, whether actually a particular bike, I can throw it into a corner or into a bend and it will come out the other side and I still feel confident about it. And that's what the Softail chassis does for me. And that's what the Sport Glide especially does for me. So that's what I think about, and that's what I think a lot of people coming to Harley Davidson now are, if they are coming to Harley Davidson, and especially if they're coming from other manufacturers, they're looking at that comparison. If there is a comparison to make, they're looking, okay, Harley Davidson, we know traditionally have bad brakes. They're not that great in going around bends, tight bends, in the twisties, all that kind of stuff at speed. And also, you know, it's reliability issues. Okay, first of all, is it going to fit me? Do I like it? Do I enjoy the ride? Can I put it into a bend? Does it handle very well? What are the brakes like? All that kind of stuff. And what is the reliability issue? We'll consider pricing as a separate issue. If you've got those 3 or 4 items down, then you are going to attract people. You are going to attract riders who possibly don't want the sports bike anymore, who don't want that. They want a change of pace, a change of ideology, a change of image, whatever you want to call it. But they want to change. And I've had so many people who've emailed me, left comments and said, do you know what? We've watched your videos. We've seen how great you think that Sport Glide is, or the Softail range is. Do you know what? I'm going to go and try one. And do you know what? As soon as I tried one, I felt exactly the same way. Now, I'm sure there are lots of other people who go and try a Harley and don't like them. There's also lots of negativity out there from people who have never actually ridden a Harley as well. But, you know, they'll like it. Obviously, there's lots of people who have ridden Harleys and don't like them at all and never will like them. The problem is that there have been comparable machines from other manufacturers that are just good as not better. Japanese made them for a longest time. Not too sure about the current Japanese, whether they're making any. I don't think they are in the 2020 models. Moto Guzzi I've always liked as a manufacturer. Obviously Indian we know, but Ducati, you know, whilst they're not making cruiser type bikes, that Diavel, that, you know, performance cruiser is a great bike. I mean, if you like, I don't care for the look of it myself, but it's a great bike. So that there are bikes out there. Triumph, you know, they make lots of this sort of style of bike, and they got a lot of market share here in the UK, around Europe, but also in the United States as well. You know, and they're using technology that is comparable to, you know, other manufacturers as well. They're focusing on the ride of that bike. Yes, they've started to evolve their lifestyle and brand to emulate Harley Davidson. You know, they've got all their merchandise, they've got, you know, Triumph owners groups type thing, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's probably not on the same scale as Harley Davidson, but they've kind of copied that as well. But there are other very small manufacturers out there who are producing, just starting out in the business, this Harley-esque lifestyle. And I've kind of reported on it in the past when I've done motorcycle shows as well. So you can see very small brands, but they're pushing this lifestyle thing as well. You know, this branding, this merchandise, because that's what it's all about. It's not only about the motorcycle, it's about creating an aura around your brand. You know, and trying to get people to buy into not only the bike, but also the concept of being proud to be seen on that bike and let everybody know, yeah, I ride a Triumph, or I ride a Moto Guzzi, I ride, or whatever it is, Heritage, whatever it is. And Harley Davidson had that, and yes, they still have it in many different ways. And there'll always be those die-hard Harley fans, die-hard Harley riders. But that's irrelevant in many ways, because what you've got to do is get the new generation to think like that. That's the biggest challenge of all. That's the biggest challenge. You're going to have changing attitudes from new buyers. You're going to have changing attitudes towards, having big loud pipes and, whatever. The changing attitudes to the environment, changing attitude to noise pollution, changing attitudes to, fuel emissions, manufacturing processes, all that kind of stuff. In 20 years time, one of the criteria for buying a motorcycle might be to say, okay, where was it manufactured? How was it manufactured? What is the carbon offsetting of the manufacture of this bike? And, so on and so forth. How many trees will be planted a year according to how many miles I ride? It could come down to that kind of thing. There'll be new materials on there. Say, okay, we're going to use plastic, so we're going to use metals. What type of metals are we going to be using? What about the manufacture of that? What's the labour cost? Who's producing the labour? What's the quality and lifestyle of that labour? All that kind of stuff. So, for all we know, manufacturing might leave this earth and it might go to the moon or might go to Mars or whatever, but let's say if you want to buy a bike that's produced in your country, United States, Britain, Italy, whatever, well, so actually local labor costs might be too costly, so therefore you have to farm out to other parts of the world. That may keep you with a brand, or may say, I don't want that brand anymore because it's not built in my country. Harley Davidson, they've gone abroad, haven't they? They've got process or manufacturing in other countries. They've got manufacturing for different components in other countries. Whereas Indian haven't. Indian are still an American company. Triumph are still a British company. Ducati, an Italian company. They produce their parts in those countries. That's the kind of level we're talking about. The Japanese manufacturers predominantly in their own country as well, but they are moving into other Far Eastern countries as well with their manufacturing process. So it's about not only keeping Harley customers happy, but it's also that next generation. It's the attitudes of both existing, new, and future customers, but it's also about attitudes of Harley Davidson themselves. Are they going to keep up with the technology? Are they going to offer the same technology? Are they going to diversify their range of bikes? And if this is a more roads policy, are they going to be able to match for pricing? So if we look at technology, you could argue that Harley Davidson right now with the live wire are at the cutting edge. But at the cutting edge of what technology? And who will buy that bike? Is it going to be just too expensive? You could say $30,000, £30,000, it's a stretch for a lot of people, most people, of course it is. And it might only be a handful of people that buy that bike. But in terms of technology, in terms of what it will fuel in the future, you could say, well, actually, Harley Davidson, a bit like NASA, they're producing stuff. It's not about today, it's about tomorrow. It's about where's the future going to take us. What they invest in today is almost like it's an experiment. They're using this as a huge experiment for the future of Harley Davidson. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at the future of the Harley Davidson. They're looking at what bikes they can produce in the future when nobody else is riding on combustion engines anymore. It all goes electric. This is where Harley Davidson are going to go, and they're diversifying. Now, some people might say it's diversifying too much. It's a betrayal of their roots, a betrayal of their history. This is not what Harley Davidson is. This is not what motorcycling should be, full stop. In fact, many people will say, you know what, I don't want anything to do with motorcycles anymore. I'm just going to go back to four wheels, my truck, whatever. That's it. Or they might say, do you know what, I'm not going to buy anything new technology. I'm just going to stick to old technology. Do you know what? People have been doing that for years, haven't they? They've been abandoning new technology and they say, yeah, I'm just going to stick with old technology. In many ways, for the home mechanic, you know, that's what you want. You know, if you like to work on bikes and if you like to wrench on bikes, let's say, for example, or cars or whatever it is, actually having an older vehicle is better in many ways, because you don't have to have the specialist tooling, you don't have to have specialist know-how, computer know-how, let's say. You can just do everything, you know, in your garage or in your workshop or whatever. It's about essentially undoing nuts and bolts and doing them back up again. Replacing part here, clean a part there, that's it. Whereas new bikes, you know, it's very daunting for a lot of people. The older you get, and if you have limited knowledge, the less you actually want to touch a bike or a car, because it's all computer based. You just don't know. You know, I've done a series of videos on the Sport Glide and the Harley Softails, and there's sensors, electrical sensors here, there, everywhere. You know, the ABS module, the ECM, the BCM modules. And it's just, you know, it's, whilst the technology is not comparable to other bikes and other manufacturers, it's still there. And you think, crikey, this is quite daunting, really. But if something goes wrong in that BCM module, that ECM module, for example, well, the home mechanic can't fix it. You know, you have to replace it. Or if there's some kind of diagnostics, but that diagnostics can only be done at a Harley dealership or something like that. So they're the only ones who can actually fix your bike, or, you know, somebody who's got all the technology or the computer software to be able to do it. This is not a Harley Davidson issue. This is a motorcycle. This is an automotive issue, in that it's actually pushing away the home mechanic from being able to fix their bike, their car, or they want to try and do that, because there's always a way of getting around it. There's always a way, and that's the beauty of YouTube and online, in that people are coming up with solutions for things all the time, aren't they? A new bit of technology comes out, and then it breaks down. You say, right, if you do this and do that, fix that wire, crimp that wire, you know, cut here, give it a bash on the side, all of a sudden it'll start working again, and you think, that's how you do it. Look, we all do it. We all go on YouTube to find a fix for something, don't we? So how do you do this? How do you do that? And that's the beauty of it. That although the manufacturers want to try and keep it all in-house and to the dealerships or whatever, you know, and then you've got technicians out there that might be very knowledgeable, but let's face it, most of these newer technicians now, they are just hooking your bike up or your car to a diagnostics. The diagnostics is saying replace that part, and they replace it. They don't know why it's failed. They don't know how it's failed. They don't know how to fix that part. All they're telling you is take that part off, put a new part on. That's it. Run the diagnostics. Does it work? Yes, fine. Bish bash bosh, you're on your way. Thanks very much. The art of the mechanic has died, let's face it, or is dying, or is rapidly dying. The home mechanic task is getting harder and harder. And manufacturers are making vehicles, making motorcycles that you can just, or they want you just to jump on and go and feel confident that it's going to be reliable. But machines aren't like that. There'll always be something that will go wrong with them. So Harley Davidson need to achieve that kind of status to keep in touch with the other manufacturers. But because they've had this whole history of lifestyle, of ownership, of experience, Harley ownership, Harley riding experience, you know, Harley rider maintenance, then if they go too far, they're actually going to lose everything that they are. They're going to lose themselves in this haze of, you know, diving into the future. Will Harley succeed? Possibly. But they have to change. Come what may, you know, though the heavens fall, they have to change. They have to evolve. Will I be riding a Harley in the future? Who knows? Will you? Who knows? You know, nobody can say that. Some people say definitely never buying a Harley again. Some people say I'm never going to buy a Harley because they're just too expensive for what they are. They've had periods in the past where they've, come into financial trouble. They've almost been bankrupt a couple of times. They had to be bailed out by, the United States government. They've had to, stop imports to protect the bike, but protect the market. But people are just savvy to this now. They think, why should we buy a Harley when we can buy a Triumph or a Kawasaki or whatever for a fraction of the price, and it'd be a better bike all around. People just, especially younger people, they're just not into this anymore. So this is why Harley have to change. And, quite rightly, they've identified they've had to change. But it's how they change, how quickly they change, what bikes they're going to produce. Are they kind of variation on the same thing, or are they going to produce something that's completely different? With the Street Fighter, with a prototype, with the Pan American, these are different types of bikes. Will there be a success? Possibly. But in the markets that they're entering, the adventure bike and the Street Fighters, what are the competitors like? Are they going to be a lot more expensive than competitors? Are they going to be better or worse? And that's the thing. How are they going to relate to the competitors in terms of pricing, but in terms of technology, in terms of actually producing bikes that people want to ride, and will they ride? The money men out there, will say that Harley Davidson, are in some ways they're a sure bet for your money, for your investment, for the future of Harley, because of the whole huge dealership network, because of the history, because of the support, because of the brand. Well, it's just like other people's money. You got an increasing share of a reducing market. That's the thing. If you've ever watched a movie called Other People's Money, and there's a very famous speech given by Danny DeVito, who is this kind of Wolf on Wall Street kind of character, you watch it. It's probably one of the best speeches that you'll ever hear in terms of financing and everything like that. And it's a great movie, by the way. But this is, one of those speeches that you'd really want to watch, and it's very similar to the Harley Davidson dealership or the Harley Davidson Motor Company that they find themselves now. You're going to have an increasing share of a diminishing market. They may have an increasing share or a big share of big tourer motorcycles, let's say United States, but everything else on their product range, they're falling. In fact, sales are falling at a global level, but also at a national level. In some markets, their numbers are increasing, but overall, they're not doing well. A few months ago, the market analysts were saying actually a 3-year projection of Harley Davidson looking good. They're looking at a 9% and then a 12% increase in profitability, turnover, so on and so forth, and also units sold. Latest analysts have shown actually that's not going to be the case. And analysts react to market forces, and they also react to actually what's happening now. Then they compare that with the market, they compare that with competitors, and they're saying now actually Harley Davidson are going to have a terrible time in the third quarter and fourth quarter, and also saying with the live wire it's just going to be this big white whale that may even sink the company completely, because it's not going to take them anywhere. As I've already said, this new technology, these new roads may alienate a big part of their fan base, but it won't attract enough people to change the fortunes of the company. And that's where the issue is. Who knows? Who knows what the future of the company will be? Will you be a supporter? Will I be a supporter of it? I've never been a supporter of a particular brand per se. I'm a supporter of a bike if it performs, if it does well. I want to know what the service is like afterwards, the after-sales service. I want to know what my Harley dealership is doing for me. I want to know the quality of the products, the support. I want to know about the reliability of that bike. And ultimately, if I continue to enjoy riding it, would I necessarily move away from another Harley Davidson onto a Japanese bike or a British bike or a German bike, Italian? Not necessarily. I would look at what's available at the time. I would look at another Harley Davidson, for example, and say, do I like that bike? Yes, I do. Yeah, maybe I'll go for that one. Would I stick with what I know? Would I just update the model that I've already got? You know, lots of questions. But I think it's one of those things. I've been doing this for many years now. Every time I've changed a bike, I've actually said, right, I'm not going to be loyal to one particular brand. I'm just going to look at the bike and if I like it. And that's it. Always fit the bike to you, whatever that bike is, I think. Where will Harley Davidson be in the future? This is the thing. We know they have to evolve. We know they have to go into new markets. And we know that as a company, they cannot rely on the domestic American market anymore. They cannot. They have to look at a global position. And any international brand will look at their global position as opposed to, you know, one particular market. It might even be the case that their biggest market is not in the United States anymore. Their biggest market will be the rest of the world. They will say there is the American and Canadian market and the rest of the world is our other market. And that's where we're going to put our focus on. Will they continue with the lifestyle aspect, the branding, whatever? Look, people have always said, you know, if it wasn't for the T-shirts, you know, the company would have gone bust years ago. That might be the case. Do things need to be changed so drastically that they alienate people, existing customers? Well, I don't think so. That's the fine line that they're going to have to tread. They're going to have to find a way to break new ground, but also still offer what people fall in love with. And they're going to have to grade it out, I think. They may have to just narrow their product line, their motorcycles on in each individual series, in the Tourers, in the CVOs, whatever, in the Softail range, and replace them with different types of bikes. We'll see this over the next couple of years with this new engine. There's a patent being developed, or has been filed, I should say, for a new type of engine as well. That'd be interesting. You know, there's talks about a new successor to the M8 engine, about rev higher, be sportier, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, there is movement there. They are refining, they are evolving the VTwin genre of bikes as well. And maybe that's where Harley Davidson need to focus their attention and say, look, it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. It doesn't matter what they're doing, you know, in Japan or Italy or in Britain. We are VTwin builders. We are, you know, building a bike for an experience, not a riding pleasure, for a community, not just for, you know, going down the road at 200 miles an hour. The technology on bikes and Japanese bikes, whatever race bikes, is just ridiculous. The prices are getting ridiculous, but also the speeds at which you can achieve are ridiculous. So much so that, do you know what? There comes a point, it's just too much. And anybody would say it's just too much at some point for the mere mortal rider. And, you know, and Harley riders, whilst they invest a lot of time and money and effort in upgrading their bike, improving their performance, let's be under no illusion, you're never going to, no matter how much you upgrade a Harley, you're never going to match a high performance bike, are you? It's never going to happen. Let's say a Japanese, you know, Kawasaki, Suzuki, whatever. It's never going to happen. So you can improve it, but, you know, you are talking about two different types of riders, two different types of riding bikes and riding experiences. And that's what Harley need to focus on. They need to make sure that they don't alienate the people that made them what they are, but they also need to get new bikes in. And they need to essentially have two types of bikes, two types of pricing and structures. They need to have two types of riding experiences. They need to have two types of Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson cannot be just one brand, one identity, one notion, one ethos anymore. It has to be multiple. It has to achieve an ability, has to have an ability to pigeonhole its riders, because not every rider is the same. You can say, right, either a tourer, okay, let's make our bikes for the tourers, people who want the tourers, okay? Let's price match that for people who can do that. Let's bring those prices down. Softails, what do they want? Right, let's bring those prices down to match that. Sportsters, let's do that. Pan Americas, whatever. Let's do that. Let's price match with other competitors. What about the electric bike market? Let's new bikes come onto the market. Okay, are we going to try and let's attract sports bike riders? Okay, do you know what? Let's see if we can get a Eric Buell type person in and start producing a bike that is it's good. It's good on the road. It might not be the fastest, but it's good. But also, it's cheap as well. If they can do that, then I think there's the future of Harley Davidson long term. If they don't, they're going to be struggling with an increasing share of this cruiser market that people are not interested in anymore. The overall market will reduce, but they'll have an increasing share of it. In the end, they'll be 100%. They'll have 100% share of a 2% market of global motorcycle sales, which isn't going to help them at all. In fact, they'll be bankrupt. Anyway, so this is the Harley Davidson future. What does it mean for them? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for all of us? What does it mean for the motorcycle industry as a whole? Whether, let's say, Harley Davidson did fall by the wayside, what would it mean for the rest of the motorcycle community? The motorcycle manufacturers, would they mop it all up, or would they take heed of what's happened and they'd say, right, I'm not too sure about this, we need to change our ways as well? Because let's not face it, this is exactly what happened to the British motorcycling manufacturers many years ago in the sort of 60s, early 70s, when they failed to recognise how good the Japanese bikes were coming into the market, and that was the end of British motorcycling. Then BSAs, Triumphs, Nortons, they all fell by the wayside because they failed to recognise the market, they failed to recognise changing preferences and better technology, and that's what it is. And maybe Harley are at a real risk of having that, and having that happen to them. Anyway, so this has been the RevelatorAlf Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed that. As I say, it's on SoundCloud, it's on Spotify and iTunes, and it's also on video podcast on YouTube channel as well. Please like, share, subscribe, leave lots of comments if you can, and share all the podcasts out to all of your friends, and let me know what you think as well. You can always contact us via the website RevelatorAlf.com. A couple of Harley pages there for you to consider as well, and it's also lots of stuff on the website to featureise upon. Check out the merchandise as well in the shop, and also the endurance rides that I'll be doing on Harley Davidson as well, to put these bikes their ultimate test, and see if they come out on top. Right, catch you on the next podcast, whenever that is. Ta-da now.
RevelatorAlf.